An 80-year-old fugitive stands in the dry dirt of the Midian desert, staring at a thorn bush that refuses to turn to ash. But in the ancient Near East, a name is much more than a tag. A name is a handle. It is the mechanism you use. Look at a burning match, a collapsing star, or the rough bark of an oak tree. Everything in the observable physical universe shares one fundamental, inescapable characteristic. Everything has a cause. The match requires a strike of sulfur against a rough surface. The tree requires a buried acorn and damp soil. The star requires a massive cloud of cold dust compressing under its own immense gravity. Every single physical object you can touch, see, or measure is the direct, biological, or chemical result of something else that came before it. We live in a chain of endless reactions, but the 4 letters given at the burning bush deliberately step outside of that chain. When God names himself with the verb haya, he is making a claim that early philosophers and medieval theologians would later call the uncaused cause. The Greeks tried to define it with abstract logic, but the ancient Hebrew text defines it with a bush that burns without turning to ash. God does not have a predecessor. He does not have a beginning. He does not rely on oxygen, gravity, or time to sustain his presence. He is not a being who happens to exist. He is existence itself. If God were merely the strongest being in the universe, he would still be a part of the universe subject to its rules, occupying a specific space, requiring a specific environment. The Egyptian deities were powerful, but they were localized. They could be contained. They could be starved if the smell of roasting meat to summon a deity, to appease them, to bind them to your political or personal cause. You learn a god's name, and you instantly know their limits. On the altar suddenly stopped. YHWH cannot be starved, because he is the absolute ground from which all other reality springs. Theologians call this concept aseity, from the Latin esse, meaning from himself. It means God is entirely self-sufficient, completely independent of the created order, possessing life entirely within his own uncreated nature. But you do not need a theology degree to feel the weight of this reality. You only need to look at the fragility of your own physical body, your heartbeat, your next breath. The firing, electrical synapses in your brain, all of it is completely dependent on a million external factors holding together. You are a caused being, desperately relying on borrowed breath and daily bread just to survive until tomorrow. But the God of the Tetragrammaton borrows nothing. This is exactly why the religious elite locked the name away in a dark sanctuary. It was too vast, too wild, too independent of their control. If God is uncaused existence, then no priest can manipulate him, no empire can contain him, and no temple bureaucracy can manage him. The scribes thought they had safely buried the verb beneath a respectable title, but the uncaused cause of the universe did not stay in the desert, and he did not stay silent. The infinite verb of the burning bush suddenly puts on human skin, walks into a crowded, dusty courtyard in first-century Jerusalem, and speaks the forbidden letters out loud. You know their territory. You know exactly what they control and what they do not. The sun god stays in the sky. Dust hangs heavy in the temple courtyard. The religious leaders circle him. Their voices echo off the high stone walls. The questions come fast. They demand answers. They invoke their sacred lineage. They claim Abraham as their father. They corner the rabbi from Nazareth. They demand his credentials. You are not yet 50 years old. They sneer. And you have seen Abraham? Jesus does not back down. He looks at the furious, sweating crowd. He speaks a sentence that shatters the afternoon heat. John chapter 8, verse 58. Before Abraham was born, I am. It sounds like broken syntax. It is not a grammatical error. It is a theological detonation. He does not say, I was. He does not say, I existed before him. He shifts completely out of the chronological past. He uses the Greek phrase ego, eimi. It is the direct Greek translation of Ahai Asher Ahai. He reaches back across 1,500 years. He bypasses the temple bureaucracy. He bypasses the terrified scribes. He reaches all the way back to the scorching heat of the Midian desert. He takes the uncaused, infinite verb of existence, and he applies it to his own human vocal cords. He is the burning bush walking. He is the tetragrammaton breathing. He is the uncaused cause standing in the dirt of Jerusalem. The reaction is immediate. The river god stays in the water. The god of the harvest can be bargained with if you bring the right grain. The crowd goes completely silent for a fraction of a second. Then the chaos erupts. They do not ask for clarification. They do not pause to debate the linguistic nuances of the Greek translation. They know exactly what he just claimed. They bend down. They scrape their hands against the rough courtyard floor. They pick up heavy, jagged rocks. You can hear the stones scrape against the pavement. The dust rises around their ankles. Their knuckles turn white around the edges of the limestone. The penalty for blasphemy is death. And uttering the sacred name, claiming the divine verb for yourself, is the ultimate blasphemy in the first century world. The priests locked the name away to protect it. Jesus speaks it in the open air to reveal it. The elite buried the verb in a vault of silence. Jesus wears the verb in human flesh. He claims the ultimate, unmanageable reality of YHWH. He refuses to be put into their theological box. And because they cannot manage him, because they cannot control him, they decide they have to kill him. They want to silence the breath. They want to extinguish the fire. But you cannot kill existence itself. You cannot stone the active verb of life. And the reason he brought that infinite verb down into the violent, dusty reality of the human experience is the actual point of the entire story. If you are in a season where the foundations of your life are actively crumbling beneath your feet, the concept of an unmanageable God can feel deeply terrifying. We are a species completely obsessed with control. We build rigid daily schedules. We purchase comprehensive insurance policies, and we create massive digital spreadsheets, all to give ourselves the comfortable illusion that we are the uncaused cause of our own lives. We want to be the authors of our own reality. And when we inevitably run into a crisis we cannot manage, we bring that exact same obsession with control directly into our religion. We want a deity who acts like a divine employee. We want to hand God a performance review based on how well he handled our personal requests this quarter. If you are sitting in the sterile, cold fluorescent light of a hospital waiting room, listening to the rhythmic beep of a distant heart monitor, you do not want a philosophical concept. You want a God who fixes the cellular mutation. You want a name you can invoke like a mechanical lever to fix the medical report resting heavy in your hands, or the bank account draining to zero, or the physical silence echoing in the hallway of an empty house, of human religion. God does not hand over a noun. He hands over a verb. The response from the fire is not a label. You want the God of the Egyptian pantheon, a localized specialist who can be bargained with. But bargaining requires leverage, and human beings ultimately possess none. The Tetragrammaton is not a title you use to get what you want. It is a reality you rest in when what you want is stripped away. The God who named himself Haya does not offer you the illusion of control. He offers you his absolute, unshakable presence. He says, "I am who I am." He will be what he will be. When your personal theology fractures, his existence does not waver. When you have absolutely nothing left to offer on the altar, he does not disappear, because his presence was never dependent on your performance in the first place. If you are in a season where God feels distant, silent, or entirely uncooperative with your life plans, you might be interacting with an idol of your own making. You might be speaking to a hierarchical title, demanding an outcome from a localized manager. Instead of breathing the name of the uncaused cause, when you finally stop trying to manage him, when you finally drop the transactional religion you inherited, you are left with something far more beautiful and far more terrifying. You are left with the quiet, biological reality of the breath in your lungs. It is a revolution. He gives Moses a word so infinite, so entirely outside the boundaries of human control. that centuries later, an entire civilization, you realize that your very existence is held together right now by his active, ongoing choice to sustain your life. Your worst failures do not cancel his active verb. Your deepest, darkest doubts do not extinguish his desert fire. And seeing God through this lens does not just change how you pray in the dark, it changes how you read every single page of the text he left behind. Moses takes off his leather sandals. The heat of the unconsuming fire presses against his weathered face. The infinite verb speaks into the dirt of Midian. An 80-year-old fugitive asks for a label to manage the divine and receives an active verb that shatters human religion. A terrified nation walks out of a transactional empire and learns that the true God cannot be bribed with a stone altar. A newborn baby takes its very first frantic gulp of cold air and unknowingly speaks the sacred name. A religious bureaucracy locks the tetragrammaton behind a wall of silence and attempts to turn intimacy into hierarchy. The physical universe spins in an endless chain of cause and effect, and the uncaused cause holds the atoms together without breaking a sweat. A crowd in Jerusalem picks up jagged limestone to kill a blasphemer and discovers they are trying to stone existence itself. Will simply refuse to speak it out loud. YHWH. The real question of this encounter isn't, what is God called? It is this. The religious elite finally succeed in stopping his human breath on a Roman cross, and 3 days later, the verb of life walks out of the tomb. Same breath, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the biology of those 4 letters. Yod, he, wow, he, not the complex theological debates about the uncaused cause. Not the terrified ancient scribes washing their hands in a bronze basin before touching the parchment. The simple, physical reality of the human respiratory system. The breath is not a biological accident. It is a continuous liturgy. If you are in a season where you cannot find the words to pray, where the grief is so heavy or the anxiety so loud, that forming a coherent theological sentence feels physically impossible, this is a place to sit. You do not need to assemble the perfect noun. You do not need to negotiate a transaction. The automatic rising and falling of your chest in the absolute dark is already speaking his name. The breath is the prayer. And may the God who refuses to be managed by human hands walk with you through the fire that will not consume you and remind you that his uncaused presence is as close as your very next breath. If this reached something in you, subscribe, leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with, what happens when the God you meet refuses to be managed? If you miss what happens in this grammar, you miss the foundation of the biblical story. Someone who is exhausted by trying to control their own reality. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts, because this is not just an ancient history lesson about a burning bush. It is a diagnosis. We still try to domesticate the divine. The air is thick with the scent of scorching wood and ozone. Yet the leaves do not crisp. The branches do not blacken. We still want a God we can define, predict, and put in a neat theological box. We want a name we can use as a spell to get what we want. But to understand the absolute shockwave of what God actually said to an old shepherd on that mountain, you have to leave the silence of the desert. You have to walk back into the deafening noise of the empire Moses left behind. A world where every deity had a face, a function, and a price. Step into the streets of ancient Thebes, and you find an empire built not just on mud, brick, and human blood, but on divine bureaucracy. Every element of the natural world has a deity attached to it, functioning like a localized manager assigned to a specific department. Hapi governs the muddy, flooding waters of the Nile. Ra controls the blinding sun that bakes the desert crust. Osiris handles the pitch-black caverns of the underworld. And every single one of them has a name. In the ancient Near East, a name is a boundary line. It is a limitation. When an Egyptian priest stands before a cold stone altar, breathing in the heavy, suffocating smoke of burning incense, he uses the specific name of a god to broker a specific deal. If the crops are failing, if you do not pray to the sun god, he has spent 40 long years hiding in this rocky wasteland. actively trying to forget the blood on his hands and the Egyptian palace of his youth. You pray to the harvest god. You offer a physical sacrifice. You chant the exact syllables of their title, and the deity is practically obligated to respond. Religion in this world was not a relationship. It was a transaction. Moses spent his first 40 years breathing this exact air. He was raised in the palatial courts of Pharaoh, surrounded by a pantheon of gods who could be negotiated with, manipulated, and carved into wooden statues you could comfortably hold in the palm of your hand. He understands the rules of this cosmic economy perfectly. The Israelites understand it, too. They have been soaking in this theological water for 400 years. Their backs are bruised by Egyptian whips, but their minds are completely shaped by Egyptian theology. If Moses walks into the slave camps and says, "A deity sent him," the immediate, cynical response of a crushed people will be, "Which one?" So, when he stands barefoot in the grid of Midian before a burning shrub, he falls back on the only religious language he knows. He asks for a name. He is essentially asking, "Which part of the universe do you manage? What is your jurisdiction? Who exactly am I negotiating with?" Moses is not asking for intimacy. He is asking for leverage. He expects a noun. He expects a title he can carry back to the brick pits of Goshen to prove he has backing from a localized, manageable power. He is a shepherd now, tending a flock that belongs to his father-in-law, a man entirely stripped of his former power. He expects a god who plays by the rules of the empire. But the voice that speaks from the fire is about to break the rules forever. Moses waits in the dry dirt. The fire crackles. The heat pushes against his weathered skin. Sweat stings his eyes. He grips his wooden shepherd's staff. He listens for a title. He listens for a category. The voice speaks from the unconsuming flame. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. God says, "I am who I am." In English translation, it sounds evasive. It sounds like a philosophical riddle. But in the original Hebrew, it is a theological earthquake. The phrase ringing out across the rocky ground is, Ehai, Asher, Ehai. The beating heart of that phrase is the Hebrew word haya. It is a verb, an active, ongoing verb. Haya means to be, to exist, to happen, to become. It is raw, uncaused existence. It is not a static state. It is dynamic, moving reality. It is the exact same root verb that thunders through the absolute dark in Genesis chapter 1. Let there be light. It is life itself in motion. God is refusing the Egyptian game entirely. He rejects the premise of the question. He will not take a localized title. And then, out of the crackling heat, the bush speaks. The voice tells him to unlace his leather sandals. He will not be the god of the river. He will not be the god of the sun. He will not be a deity you can carve out of stone and place on a gold altar. He will not be managed by a human priesthood. He is the God of existence itself. He is the active, sustaining force, holding the atoms of the universe together, while simultaneously speaking from a desert shrub. He cannot be summoned with an incantation. He cannot be bribed with a blood sacrifice. He cannot be bound by a geopolitical border. Moses asks for a handle to control him. God hands him a fire that consumes everything. The answer is not a boundary. It is an ocean. And from this absolute, staggering verb, haya, God forms the specific, personal name he gives to Moses in the very next verse. He takes the root of existence and turns it into 4 Hebrew consonants. Yod, he, wow, he, iha, ardaik. This is the tetragrammaton, the sacred, personal name of God. It appears over 6,000 times in the pages of the Old Testament. It is the name God binds to his covenant with Israel. But the mystery of these 4 letters goes far deeper than grammar, because the gritty soil beneath his feet is suddenly holy ground. It commands him to walk back into the empire that wants his head on a spike. The 4 letters sit on the ancient parchment like a locked door. Yod, he, wow, he, for centuries. Linguists, historians, and rabbis have debated the exact pronunciation of this word, but Jewish scholars have pointed out a physical, biological reality about these specific consonants that bypasses academic theology entirely. In the mechanics of ancient Hebrew, these four letters function as unvocalized aspirates. They do not require the friction of the tongue against the teeth to produce. They do not require the pressing together of the lips. They are simply the sounds of open, unobstructed, flowing air. If you attempt to pronounce them without adding the hard vowels that modern languages require, you do not get a standard, structured word. You get the soft, hollow sound of a deep intake of air. You get the gentle hiss of an exhale. Yod, he, wah, he. The name of God is not a word you have to memorize. It is the breath you are already taking. If realizing that your own biology is whispering, the divine name is stirring up a sense of awe you've never felt before, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So a newborn baby enters the cold air of the world, takes its very first frantic gulp of oxygen, stand before the most powerful monarch on the planet, and demand the immediate release of an enslaved nation. Moses is terrified. He is stalling, and unknowingly speaks the name of the Creator. A human being breathes roughly 23,000 times a day. We do it when we are wide awake, our boots hitting the hot asphalt. We do it when we are fast asleep, our chests rising and falling rhythmically in the absolute dark. We do it when we are weeping in devastating grief, gasping for air. And we do it when we are laughing until our ribs physically ache. Every single one of those 23,000 breaths is the sacred name, breathed back to the one who originally formed humanity from the dirt, and breathed his own spirit into our lungs. From the maternity ward to the final, rattling exhalation on a hospice bed. The entire chronological span of a human life is bracketed by the pronunciation of this name. It is the most universal language on earth. You do not have to be a biblical scholar to speak it. You do not even have to believe in God to speak it. Your lungs are testifying to His living presence every 3 seconds, keeping you anchored to the reality of Haya, the God of ongoing existence. For the ancient Israelites in the desert, this revelation was the ultimate intimacy. It was the biological rhythm of life itself, vibrating through their very bodies. But as the centuries passed, something tragic happened to these four letters. A deep, rigid fear crept into the religious establishment, looking for any possible leverage. He asks a perfectly logical, too ancient question. If I go to the Israelites, and they ask me who sent me, and a name meant to be breathed by every living creature was suddenly locked behind a wall of absolute, unbreakable silence. A scribe sits in a stone room, dust dancing in a narrow shaft of sunlight. His hand hovers over a sheet of scraped animal skin. The black ink on his reed pen is wet, ready to strike the parchment. He is copying the scroll of Exodus, meticulously transferring every ancient syllable from one generation to the next. But when his eyes hit the four sacred consonants Yod, he, wah, his hand stops moving. He sets the pen down. He walks to a bronze basin and washes his hands in cold water. He picks up a completely different pen, reserved only for this one specific word, and he writes the four letters in absolute, terrifying silence. And when the public reader unrolls this very scroll in the synagogue, he will not pronounce the word the scribe just wrote. When his eyes see YHWH, his mouth will say something else entirely. He will say Adonai. Adonai means Lord. Adonai means master. Adonai is a title of hierarchy. For the early Israelites, the name of God was a heartbeat. It was spoken in the burning heat of the wilderness. It was sung in the rocky valleys of Canaan. It was the biological rhythm of a people walking out of slavery, holding tightly to the God of ongoing existence. But by the time the second temple is built, the heartbeat stops. What is your name? Most people read this encounter and assume Moses is just asking for a basic introduction. a cosmic ID card to prove his authority. The trauma of the Babylonian exile has infected the religious scholars. They are terrified of breaking the third commandment, taking the Lord's name in vain. They are so afraid of mishandling the divine breath that they decide to simply stop breathing it altogether. The priests ban the pronunciation from the streets. They confine the word to the inner sanctuary. They allow the high priest to whisper it exactly one time a year, on the Day of Atonement, while the massive crowd outside lies flat on the rough pavement, completely terrified of hearing the syllables. The name becomes too holy for the human mouth. This is not an act of reverence. It is the architecture of distance. The religious elite take the wild, untamable verb of existence, the fire that refuses to be categorized, and they replace it with a standard, manageable title. They trade intimacy for bureaucracy. They take the god of the breath and they put him back into a master of the empire. Someone who rules from a distant, untouchable throne. They lock the tetragrammaton in a vault of silence. And for generations, the exact pronunciation of the 4 letters is intentionally, systematically erased from human memory. But a verb this powerful cannot be buried by religious fear, because the reality of what those 4 letters actually represent demands an explanation that will force the greatest minds of history to grapple with the very origin of the universe itself. Moses is asking for a label so he can categorize the entity burning in front of him. But the answer he gets back shatters the entire framework. When you look at how these specific consonants are actually pronounced in the human mouth, you uncover a detail that changes how you view your own physical body.